part 2 of fixing up the cheapest BMW 5 Series in the country. Before we get into things though, please give this video a like, it really does help me out and it shows your appreciation. Now then, what is the plan today? So, we have a whole bunch of parts to install. Probably wondering what these are. So for those of you that do not know, I had a little issue with this car. Ended up stranded because, yeah, this happened. So one of the front coil springs just snapped on me after I hit a pothole. So we are going to have to swap those out. Of course, whenever you are doing any sort of suspension work, you always want to do it in pairs, so both of the front springs are going to be swapped. So that is exactly what we have here, genuine sacks. I'm pretty sure this is what they use from the factory. Of course you can, get cheaper aftermarket ones, but I really don't think there was that much in the price, so I just went with the genuine sacks. I have a toolkit to get those fitted. The spring compressor, it's slightly different to a regular spring compressor because I believe it has to make contact with the shock itself. I'll show you when it comes to removing and installing those. Then we also have some brake discs. Yeah, they are coated ones as well, so they shouldn't rust. Of course, brake pads. What is this? It's a crankcase breather, and this is just a new wear sensor. That is for the rear brakes. The fronts are absolutely fine. I think they was changed like very recently, but the rears, I notice, definitely seen better days. The discs themselves, they look pretty old and rusted, and the pads, they have like next to no meat on them, so I know that's going to be an advisory on the next MOT, which this thing has to go for one soon. So yeah, I want to get it mechanically perfect in today's video, but yeah, enough waffling, let's crack on. So then, I guess first thing is first, we will swap the front springs out. We'll start with the broken one first. Now when it comes to the removal of the shock itself, I'm guessing there's a few different ways you can do it, but I want to make this as pain-free as possible. So of course we have to disconnect the shock from the hub, which there is a pinch bolt here, and there's also another bolt you're probably not going to be able to see. So there's this pinch bolt here that holds the shock to the hub, or I guess to this bracket here, and there's also this bolt that holds this bracket to the shock itself, and then there's also this nut that holds this bracket to the drop link. So we have to disconnect one of these, and because I don't really feel like removing that nut there because it's more than likely seized and I don't want to have to swap out the drop link, so I'm going to leave that as it is and just disconnect this bracket from the shock. So just going to remove those two bolts, and then of course get the brake pad wear sensor out of the way, or ABS sensor, not too sure which one this is, and then the brake hose, and then it should just be the bolts, or the nuts rather, at the top holding the shock in place then. So yeah, as we can see, just three what looks to be 30mm nuts on top. So that all sounds relatively easy. Let's see how we get on. Okay, first bolt, 16mm, removed relatively painless. It's one of the bolts so that's the bolt that holds this bracket to the hub, it looks like. And then there is an 18mm bolt that holds the shock to the hub itself as well, the pinch bolt. Is there a nut on the other end? Yes, there is. So I'm going to need a spanner on that. That's the bolt removed. That's the nut removed. Keep those safe. So then, with those two bolts now removed, as you can see, that bracket is now away from the shock, still with the drop link installed, and another very thin bracket with all of the hoses, the ABS sensor, and yeah, there is no brake pad wear sensor on this side. That is all now removed and over to one side. So now, in theory, all that's holding the shock in place is those three nuts on top, and of course the fact that the shock is wedged into the hub, so we'll need to kind of split that apart to remove it. Now then, as you can see, with those three 13mm nuts removed, the shock has indeed dropped down, but it is still stuck into the hub. So I'm going to get something hard and flat like this chisel, tap it in there, and then hopefully release it. It's spread, but it's just held in by dirt, it looks like. There we go. That's the whole shock assembly removed. And that really wasn't very painful at all. That took maybe 5 minutes. Yeah, not bad really. And now then, because the fact that we have a broken spring, it of course made the removal of it a lot easier. I didn't have to compress it or anything. I didn't even have to remove the top hat off of the shock. I could literally just unwind it down off the bottom of the shock here. So yeah, do not do what I'm about to do if you still have your spring in place, because it will be under tension and it will potentially injure you. So on the top we have, well, it was beneath this plastic cap here, we have a 21mm nut. If you have an impact wrench, you should be able to remove it without having to hold the shock in place. That's what I'm going to attempt to do. That was a fail. I guess I'm going to have to find a way to hold this shock in place while removing this nut. Saying that, I literally just held the shock in place, and I mean, I just held it in place with my hand, and it didn't take much force at all to remove this. Yeah, this can't be torqued up very much at all. I didn't take anything to remove that. This should now come off. Of course, this is our bearing, so I'm going to give this a clean up, maybe cover it in some grease as well. I guess this is actually the cap for the bearing. It should be on there like that. So yeah, I'm going to give this a good clean up and then pack some fresh grease in that, because those ball bearings there, they should not be exposed. Yeah, it should look something a little like that, and this top hat should come off. Of course, don't lose this washer as well. Then you would then pull your spring off, but in our case it's already removed, so I'm just going to pull off the bump stop and the shock cover, and then the spring seat, which we will be reusing. So yeah, basically now just a case of giving everything a good clean up, a good grease, and then getting the new spring installed. Just quickly then, this is how we're looking. Just gave the shock itself a bit of a clean up, also sprayed some oil on the shaft itself, and then just gave the rubbers a little bit of a clean up, and then packed some grease into the top mount bearing itself. Now I can install this cap back on. Just sits there like that, and I can grab the new spring and then install the entire shock assembly back together. Okay then, so as we can see, the shock assembly is now reinstalled. Pretty self-explanatory when it comes to the reinstallation. One thing to point out, the orientation of the spring with these Sachs springs, it comes with a sticker which indicates top pointing up, and to be honest, you can't really get it the wrong way around anyway. At the bottom it's more oval or egg shaped, and at the top it's much wider and much rounder. So yeah, basically just push the spring all the way to the end of the top mount rubber, and then the bottom one should be in the correct position. It's there. Don't be fooled into thinking it has to go all the way to there. As you can see, that's dirty. The spring has never ever sat there. It actually sits just on that edge right there. And then yeah, pretty much just the reverse of the disassembly. Of course, use the spring compressor. If you're wondering how to use this style spring compressor, basically the bottom or the top, whichever way you have this around, will sit on not the very bottom spring, because of course you have to get it onto the shock. Probably want to put it on one coil up, and then the other end of the spring compressor tool, that will actually sit not on the spring but on the spring top hat on there, and yeah, it'll just ensure that the spring is compressed properly. And then obviously just keep doing it until you can get the bearing on, the top mount bearing, and then indeed the nut, which I have just done that, which I have just tightened down with an impact wrench. It obviously does have a torque setting, but it really can't be much at all, because yeah, it took next to no effort to release it. But yeah, I guess now we should get this thing reinstalled back onto the car. And just like that, the shock assembly is now in place. 3 nuts tightened up on the top as well. Now, if you've done this job before yourself, I know what you're thinking. How the hell did you get that shock inside of the wing without unbolting any of the suspension arms? Very good question. Like I said, I wanted to make this job as pain-free as possible. I didn't want to mess with any of the suspension arms. I didn't even want to undo the drop link. And all we had to do was of course remove the 2 bolts from here, and the 3 nuts on top. So when it came to getting the strut back into place, basically underneath the wing, and I guess it would be if you was to remove the strut from the wheel arch, if you had a full intact spring, of course, you need to use a spring compressor. So of course use the spring compressor tool, compress the spring and allow me to push the shock down just a tiny bit. Managed to get it under the wheel arch, and as you can see, it's now in place. A few things to point out. First one is when it comes to the reinstallation of these nuts, if you want to keep your camber setting the exact same as what it was previously, I have no idea if it was, you know, good, if it had negative camber, positive camber, no idea. But I wanted to just put it back to how it was before. Of course, you want the nuts to go in the same position as they were. Second thing is we have the locating pin missing. As you can see, that's just a hole there now. From factory, this is, you know, there's a pin here just to help you locate it, help you to put it back into the position it's supposed to be in. But a lot of people remove it so they can get some adjustment on these nuts and, you know, adjust the camber essentially. All that I done is to get this in the correct position was just put an Allen key down that hole, basically centered it, and of course tighten down these nuts. But yeah, with this side now done, we'll go ahead and do the exact same on the other side. Of course, that spring is not broken, but it's just as well that we swap out anyway. And just like that, that is this side done as well. And if you're wondering what kind of condition the original front springs are in, or were in, this is of course the broken one. I have a feeling that this is not an original spring from factory. You know, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think the genuine BMW or Sachs springs came with those markings on there. This one, I cannot see any kind of paint on them, although I can see some writing on it there. Looks like some sort of part number, but it doesn't look like a BMW part number. So I would say there's a good chance these springs have already been swapped out before, and yeah, probably far inferior to the genuine BMW or Sachs ones like I have installed, and probably part of the reason why they have failed prematurely. But yeah, these Sachs ones hopefully should last a good, I don't know, 10, 15 years or so. I think they're much better protected compared to the aftermarket equivalents. So as you can see, front of the car is now on the ground. I have went ahead and just released the cap off of the brake fluid reservoir because it's time to do the rear brakes. Now, I don't know how well you're going to be able to see this on camera, but these brake discs are pretty badly scored. The majority of this is of course just surface rust, but they are very, very scored, as you can see. Yeah, no meat left on the pads at all. So whether or not somebody has swapped out the discs and then used the old pads and they've just, you know, destroyed the new discs, I don't know. But like I said, we're going to be swapping out the discs and the pads, and we have a new wear sensor as well. That's on the other side though, I believe. But I'm not going to bore you with me showing you how to swap out the brakes. I've done it probably a dozen times on the channel before, especially on an E60. I believe I've done that twice. So yeah, if you do want to know exactly how to, you know, strip down the front or the rear brakes, I have that, you know, in depth on my channel. So yeah, let's just crack on. Let's get both sides swapped out. Yeah, just quickly then, this is how much meat is left on the pads. To be honest, this is probably, you know, the normal amount where most people would swap them out at, but I, you know, end up just, you know, swapping things out way before they require it, and yeah, I'm just not used to this amount. Yeah, other side pretty much the same, so they have worn evenly, but yeah, definitely not a whole lot of life left in them. I'm actually surprised that it hasn't triggered the brake pad warning sensor. I won't be surprised to see if it is just hung up out of the way, so it, you know, it isn't being triggered on the other side. But yeah, I guess we'll have to wait and see. Another good point to make, another thing that I have noticed is, you see this nut here, this is the drive shaft nut. This is in very good condition, and I know for sure that this has been replaced recently, and I would also say that the drive shaft has been replaced recently. See the inside of it, how it's silver, and the fact that there is no paint flaking off it. Yeah, these tend to flake paint off, and yeah, they like to rust. Yeah, this one's in very good condition, so definitely been replaced recently. Okay, so one side now done, all put back together. Of course, just the wheel to go back on. With the other side, pretty much as I expected. Brake pad wear sensor tied up out of the way, not even in the pad, because yeah, fairly sure that would have triggered by now. Had an absolute nightmare trying to get this wheel off though, literally seized on. That's why I always apply a small amount of copper grease just around the hub there, just so it doesn't get corroded on. Always seems to be the case, especially after wheels have been refurbished. There's a tiny amount of powder coat in there, couple that with corrosion and it just welds the wheel on. So I'll give that a good clean as well before that goes back on. And that is this side now done as well. Of course, new discs, new pads, new wear sensor. I could have in theory used that old one if I wanted to, but just as well that we replace it for a nice new one. Put the engine bay back together, of course, tighten the cap on the brake fluid reservoir, bonnet now down. All that's left to do, get the wheels back on, then we can get this thing down on the ground. Now there is one more thing that I do want to do in this video, that is to try and clean up the headlights a little bit. If you watch the previous videos, you'll know that these look a hell of a lot better to what they did previously. I have already had like a very quick attempt at cleaning these up. Literally just used a tiny bit of T-cut, and yeah, as you can see, they are, you know, a hell of a lot better compared to what they were like before. Still a little bit of material left to remove, and I will actually be giving these a good proper polish, and I may even give them a coat of lacquer. But because I want to take this thing for an MOT, and obviously I'd rather not have advisories, headlights, they were an advisory on the previous MOT. I think I'm just going to go over with some T-cut on this again. Of course the same on the other side, as you can see. Yeah, the other side, this side is a little bit cloudier, so yeah, I'm going to give these a bit of a clean up, and then I think that'll probably wrap today's jobs up. I did say I wanted to swap out the crankcase breather, this thing as well, in today's video. I will still be swapping this out, don't worry, but I'm going to be doing it, you know, at the same time that I do a full service now, because you have to pretty much remove the airbox to access this thing. It makes sense to do it while I swap out the air filter. At the same time, I'll clean out the airbox itself, and yeah, swap out all of the other filters and fluids at the same time. But yeah, that'll more than likely be in the next video. Okay then, so with another quick going over with some T-cut, definitely not perfect, you know, nowhere near how I would like them looking, but I can't really see this now being an advisory on MOT. Before, the whole thing was completely cloudy, but yeah, I wouldn't say so now, so then that's good enough for now. Like I said, I'll probably do this properly. It's going to need some fine grit sandpaper on here. You know, I'll do a wet sand and then I'll probably get my DA polisher out for the first time. But yeah, for now, that'll do. Well, there we go then. Part 2 on the cheapest BMW 5 Series in the country. Now done. What have we done? In this video we have of course swapped out the front springs. One of them had broken. The other one is just worth swapping things out in pairs. Suspension components, steering components, always swap them out in pairs. If one has failed, chances are the other side is not too far behind, and it's good to know that the car is nice and even. So yeah, front springs swapped out, rear brake discs and pads swapped out, and what else? Oh, headlights. Yeah, we've given them a little bit of a clean up. Like I said, I will be doing a proper job with them. I do have a DA polisher now, so once I have some pads and some polish, I'll give them a good proper clean up. But yeah, fairly happy with how things are going. I really think there'll probably be maybe 2 more videos left on this car. The next one will probably be giving it a full service, you know, all the filters, all of the fluids, and then I think after that we'll just wrap things up and get anything else done on the car that needs to be done, really. Yeah, it's really been a very smooth project thus far. I don't want to jinx things too early though, but yeah, I am planning on doing a bit of a road trip. I'm planning on going up to Scotland for a couple of weeks, so I'll probably take that car. Very economical, and obviously it's a comfortable 5 Series, so that will also give me an opportunity to make sure that there isn't any further issues with the car before it does, of course, go for sale. So I'll probably be going up for sale maybe mid to late July. I have had a bunch of people ask me about the car already, so if you are interested in this car, you will have to email me at georgeostersbusiness@gmail.com. That should be down in the description box below of all my videos if you want to do that. But yeah, gonna leave this one here. Hopefully you've all enjoyed it. Please give it a like, leave a comment down below, subscribe if you have not already done so, and I'll see you all in the next one.